What's going on YouTube? It's Deej, back again with another video, and today we're reacting to Todd McShay's latest 2023 NFL mock draft, and I'll give my grade at the very end of the video. Good turnaround for Todd. He only put out a mock like 2 weeks ago, and we reacted to that on the channel if you want to go back and check it out and see what's changed maybe pre-combine to post-combine, but this is his post-combine mock, and I actually have a ton of post-combine mock reactions, one coming tomorrow, and I'm going to be doing it with the Goat House, and then maybe even one more next week, kind of exploring the idea of putting, picture in picture and kind of going along with a video versus just doing it when it's a written article like Todd McShay. So let me know as we move along throughout this week and then next week if you have a bias towards one of those two mock reaction styles, or hey, it's a mock reaction, you're going to watch the video, and we'll see how the analytics deal with it as well. But I'd love to know your thoughts down below. But let's go ahead and jump into Todd McShay's latest mock draft, and we start with the trade at number 1 with the Colts, moving up and selecting Bryce Young. Yep, this makes a ton of sense. Not going to be mad about it if it happens. To me, it's the move that the Colts should make. So off to a good start there, McShay. Let's move on to 2. CJ Stroud, then the pick for the Texans. I mean, he looked pretty good throwing the ball at the combine. Didn't participate in the athletic stuff. So I'd venture to say his pro day is probably going to be the opposite. He probably will throw, actually. But nonetheless, that's when we'll get the idea of what his 40's like, some of those other athletic measurables. So that'll be exciting, but he did look good spinning it in Indy. And if he's your QB2, then I trust that process. And if that's the case for Houston, it's a warranted pick there at 2. I'd personally go Levis, but either way, if that's your QB2, then make that pick. Then Will Anderson, the Cardinals, so pretty chalky beginning. Couple quarterbacks. Will Anderson, team that needs defense, gets the best defensive player without any off-field concerns, so definitely makes a lot of sense. And the Cardinals desperately need some juice there on the edge, too, so would love that pick as well. Then we get another projected trade. The Bears pulled a double trade down. We saw this from Kuiper in his latest mock, and I've seen some other mocks, including some of the other ones that I'm going to be reacting here on the channel, with the double trade down from the Bears. And a lot of Bears fans have been asking for that, so I'm sure Chicago fans seeing these will be very, very happy. But in this case, it's the Raiders moving up to 4 and then nabbing their quarterback of the future, Anthony Richardson. Yeah, hot name after the combine, right? Like, we knew he was a twitchy athlete. I mean, I think it's kind of a little overblown because of that. We already knew he was a freak athlete, but he was a historically freak athlete, so there is that. So him coming at 4, I think this is kind of fun for what the Raiders might potentially do. Carr going to New Orleans, the Raiders, the Jets and Rodgers talks. Sounds like the Raiders might be on the outside looking in when it comes to the QB veteran market outside of Jimmy Garoppolo, which if you sign Jimmy Garoppolo, I would like to see the Raiders go ahead and draft a guy like Anthony Richardson or Will Levis. Richardson kind of makes more sense timeline-wise. You can play Jimmy G for a year, have Richardson sit, and then eventually turn the reins over to him. So I like this pick a ton, and it's not actually a huge trade-up expense from 7 to 4, other than the fact that teams know that if the Raiders are moving up, it's for a quarterback. So it'll get a little bit more costly there, but good opportunity here for the Raiders to play the board, right? Like, not moving all the way up to 1, not moving to 2, slightly less assets moving out by moving to 4, and you still get that quarterback of the future. And then we get to 5, the Seattle Seahawks taking Tyree Wilson. Yeah, this is becoming kind of chalk, but I still think it's the right move. Right now for the Seahawks, it's the edge rusher they don't have. Get that insane arm length, 86-inch wingspan, 6'6", and a little bit less than 280 pounds, but still nonetheless has a really good frame. And add on to that, the versatility moving him inside and out. I think that ensures that Seattle's going to have a rotation of Uchenna Nwosu, Boye Mafe, and Tyree Wilson when it comes to passing down situations. And also Tyree Wilson's run-stopping ability, I think you'll see pretty much right away. And he's this interesting blend of played 5 years in college, multi-year starter, I think can produce now, specifically as a run defender, but also there's still some untapped potential as a pass rusher because he's not super refined there, which, every college pass rusher, you're going to be hard-pressed to find a guy at the college level that has his moveset NFL ready, right? So naturally a work in progress there for Wilson, but I'm excited, and I think the tools that he has gives him a pretty solid baseline. That arm length and the strength that he can play with, and the fact he's 6'6", almost 280 pounds, I mean, there's just not a whole lot that you can do to match that. So I think this is a guy that comes with a relatively high floor, which is good for Seattle considering they were in the playoffs last year. But there's also a lot of excitement that can come out of Wilson being the pick here in the top 5 because he does have some untapped potential. Lions take Christian Gonzalez. Yeah, Christian Gonzalez could be the first corner off the board. I feel pretty confident in saying that. I mean, sub 4.40, 40+ inch vertical. And, with 6'2" height, the long arms, guy who has the making of being good in man or zone. I think that goes a long way too. So Putting him in this Aaron Glenn defense would be really exciting. I'd love to see what he has, and that man press type of heavy defense. Played a lot more off coverage at Oregon, but I think that's just him fitting into that scheme. I think he could do that. Like, let's say somehow he lingered on the board till Washington at 16. I think it'd be a great fit in Jack Del Rio's defense, but I just think he's certainly going to go a lot higher, and I think because of that scheme versatility, he does boost the stock there. But would love to see what him and Jeff Okudah as that boundary corner duo could mean for that Lions defense. So love that pick there at 6. Bears take Peter Skoronski. Yeah, I've kind of tempered away from the offensive line discussions when it comes to the Bears until we get to the second round. But considering now they're moving beyond 4 because of the Jalen Carter situation, that does feel more and more likely. Offensive line is kind of back on the board, whether it's at 7, getting a guy like Skoronski, maybe they move back to 9. I've seen a ton of mocks now with Carolina, which, by the way, I was saying, 2 months ago now, I still think they're the team that's most likely to be desperate enough to give up the assets needed to move up to 1. So it's been cool to kind of see mocks kind of bear that out. And now that Chicago isn't feeling that they need to stay in the top 4, I think you'll continue to see a whole lot of that. I still think that trade is certainly now probably the most likely outcome that I think Chicago would take to get that much more extra in a haul versus moving to 4. But anyways, that's another topic for another day. So at 9, that could be Paris Johnson Jr., could be Peter Skoronski. Getting back to the point here, offensive line back on the table for the Chicago Bears. Then we get to 8, Nolan Smith. Yeah. If you're going to tell me a speed rusher is going to go in the top 10, sorry, Kuiper. It's probably not going to be Will McDonald. And post-combine, it's almost surely going to be Nolan Smith. I said in my combine winners, he's going to go 12 to 15. He could go even higher than that because sub 4.40, 40-plus inch vertical. The broad was really good too. I mean, he showcased speed and explosiveness. And this is a guy who's a team captain. I think he's going to be crushing the interview process. And he's just going to be a guy that when teams talk to him, they like talking to him, right? He's just kind of had that high character about him. Top 10 feels like a really plausible outcome for Nolan Smith. And for the Falcons, you need edge rushers. And this, I've been kind of keen. I even said this with Will McDonald in the Kuiper mock where, I don't know if I want to add another lighter rusher considering I already have Arnold Ebiketie. But Nolan Smith, he's sub 240, but this dude, the best thing he brings to the table right here, right now, is his run defense. So, you'd be pairing up another lighter rusher with, Arnold Ebiketie, but given his instincts and his run-stopping ability, I'm not as worried about it here versus like a Will McDonald or something like that. So I like that pick a fair amount for the Falcons. And then Will Levis goes 9. So, we do get our 4 quarterbacks in the top 10. I've been saying for a while now, I do think that is ultimately what we'll get. So in this case, it's just Levis is the last quarterback off the board, which I'm starting to see more and more in mocks. I still have him as my quarterback too. I still believe in the upside there, but nevertheless, we're going to get 4 quarterbacks in the top 10. I'm feeling more and more confident about that. Panthers need one. So if Levis is the last guy available, they don't make the move up, then this is the outcome they're kind of stuck with. At pick number 10, Bijan Robinson to the Eagles. I would love to make this pick, but this is definitely much more of a selection that falls into the camp of what would be cool versus what will happen. I don't think Howie Roseman's going to, spend a top 10 pick, let alone a first rounder, or rather a first rounder, let alone a top 10 pick on a running back. He doesn't draft linebackers, doesn't draft safeties early. He is very keen on position value, and I think that's a big reason why Philadelphia has been a pretty damn good team over the last 2 decades, right? So I'd love to see them take Bijan. Him behind that offensive line would be crazy. You're adding another great receiving talent into the mix. And plus, just like the backfield component of like, when there's a read option, a defender is stuck between having to key on Hurts or key in on Bijan. And that's a decision I just don't want to have to make. So I want to force defenses to make that type of decision. So love to see it. I just don't think it will happen, that said. But let's move on to the Titans at 11. Paris Johnson Jr. Levis won a ton. OT1 for me. And looked really good at the combine. Honestly, all the top tackles look pretty good. And a lot of the tackles in general, because, Blake Freeland, Cody Mock, who's kind of an inside-out flexible guy. I think I'm projecting him more at guard to start with flexibility to move to tackle down the line. But Blake Freeland had a pretty good combine. DeJuan Jones, really good. So this tackle class kind of, all in all, improved their stock in Indianapolis, which is huge because we already knew the top guys were good, but by feeling that much more sure about DeJuan Jones and Blake Freeland, you feel better about those day 2 guys, which goes a long way about how I feel about this class. So Paris Johnson Jr. makes a lot of sense for the Titans. It's a huge need. They just moved on from Taylor Lewan. So to me, go ahead and grab the best tackle in the class. Good mover too. So he'll be an impact player in the run game, but already a really good pass protector as well. Texans take Jalen Carter. I think a fall outside the top 10 is plausible. To me, honestly, though, if it sticks to the 2 misdemeanors, which is not something you like to have to say, but if it sticks to that, he's not getting past the Eagles at 10. I think the Eagles will be, if he falls into their lap, they're going to be able to pull the trigger and try to work with him and try to grow him maturity-wise. But a lot of the same stuff could be applied here to Houston. It's a team that has, a different timetable than the Eagles, but because of that, you can kind of work with Jalen Carter and whatever may come of his legal situations. They kind of have that built in to where they can handle that, and especially at 12. It's a different conversation than versus like when we were talking about Houston taking the best defensive player on the board at 2, right? Like I feel better about getting him at 12, but obviously there's a ton that still needs to be figured out and a ton more details that need to be released about Jalen Carter and his situation. I'm not a lawyer. I don't want to speculate much more than I already have on the channel just because I'm going to be talking out of my ass if I'm honest with you. So it's going to have to be wait and see territory here with Carter. But I still think Eagles probably grab him up by 10. But if he falls outside the top 12, I think this is an awesome opportunity for Houston to try to grab a falling star, work with his maturity. And if there's a guy to be a leader of men, this is why I love the D'Amico Ryans hire, because he is a fantastic leader. If there's a guy to help kind of course correct Carter, if you will, I think D'Amico Ryans is that guy. Let's get to 13 now. The Jets take Broderick Jones. Makes sense. Looked really good. Really athletic at the combine. Has that strength in his profile. 1-year starter, though. That's kind of the one limitation I have and one knock I have against him. And he kind of shows as a raw pass protector. The Jets need tackle. And, I mean, if they can make it work with Mekhi Becton, that is one awesome tackle duo when it comes to an athletic standpoint. Like Broderick Jones and Mekhi Becton, there are not many guys built the way they are that move the way they do. So that would be a really awesome, tackle duo to potentially put around Aaron Rodgers. Those discussions happening as I'm recording this. So pretty cool stuff. And if I'm a Jets fan, there might be a world where you get Rodgers and still have this pick. That, I don't want to get too carried away and speculate too heavily on because I'm not in the room. I don't know what that, all entails. But that cap hit, what that comes with Rodgers, the Jets might be able to do a second this year and a first next year, or maybe 2 twos. I mean, who knows? But if they can keep this pick at 13, get a tackle, kind of reinforce that offensive line and still get Rodgers, that is an absolute win of all wins for the Jets. Patriots then take Quentin Johnston, still my wide receiver 1. I know a lot of people are kind of souring on Johnston, but that's fine. I'll take 208 pounds, 6'4", 4.4 speed, 40-inch vertical. I'll take that all day. But not only is he's not N'Keal Harry because one, he has more athletic ability than Harry, but he wasn't only asked to go win it in the air, right? Like I think he actually has a decent amount of capabilities of being a good deep route runner, and I don't think much more was added to the route tree because it's TCU. Like this is not a program known for developing wide receivers. Now, this was Quentin Johnston. He had that route tree with Lincoln Riley, maybe. Then I'd be like, okay, that's a little weird because you've seen him do so many different things with wide receivers and ask wide receivers to do so many different things. Why was he only running these routes? Why was he only able to get open on plays like that? So I think it's just you have to take the context of the offense, the school, the program, their history, tradition, all that sort of stuff into play here for Quentin Johnston. And off of that, not only was he asked to be a guy to be a deep threat, but because of that offense, he was great after the catch. I mean, this guy was readily, consistently used as a ready to go, get the ball out quick, tackle this monster type of weapon inside that offense. So I think you're getting a good satellite player, getting a good deep threat. That's why I'm really excited about him. And I think it's not for the matter that he's incapable of adding more routes to his route tree. It's just he wasn't asked to do it. So I do think with a year or two's time, we'll be able to see him add that intermediate part to his game and become a threat in that 10 to 20 yard range. So I think Quentin Johnston's just kind of now fully hitting a stride. I think he's become that much better of a receiver at the NFL level. Michael Mayer to the Packers. Would love to see it. Don't think it will happen. I think they still end up going defense round 1. Defense or offensive line, which, tackle, especially with some flexibility, like Peter Skoronski falls here. It may not be the sexiest pick, but I could totally see that being the move there for the Packers. And then they'll address maybe pass catcher in round 2. Also, we'll see what they get for Aaron Rodgers. If it ends up being a second first rounder, then yeah, maybe. If they get 13 to go along with 15, maybe they go defense then Mayer or something like that. I could see that being plausible. Or they double up on defense like they did last year. So I'm still thinking this is going to be defense or O-line, but Mayer would be fun. Pair him up with Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, give Jordan Love a really solid young pass-catching core around him, give him a fair shot, but also that's a really cheap offense. So I'd love to see what else they could do to fully maximize that roster. Like, where else does that money go, right? Like, obviously you're paying Jair Alexander. Aaron Jones took a pay cut, but he's still making decent money. They have, an okay amount of money spent on the offensive line as of now, but that's going to only get that much more expensive down the line. So I'd be interested to see if they did go tight end here with those 2 wide receivers and Jordan Love near the end of a rookie contract, but still in a rookie contract. Where do they spend that money elsewhere? That'd be kind of a fun tracking thing. It's something I have to follow with the Packers. Then we get to the Commanders. Devon Witherspoon. I think this makes sense, and then if I saw it, Emmanuel Forbes actually. So okay, let's come back to that. Devon Witherspoon. I could see where he's ranked ahead of Joey Porter Jr. I think Porter Jr. might be a little bit better fit for Del Rio. But nevertheless, Witherspoon's sub 6 foot. He's right around that 180-pound mark. So comparing him to Gonzalez and Porter Jr., not quite the same as when I thought he was, 6'1", 190, like Illinois has him listed as. But, nevertheless, you look at his tape and he looks like the guy that's most NFL ready right here, right now. So because of that, if he's the second corner off the board, I don't hate it whatsoever. When it comes down to him and Porter Jr. specific right now, because I'm going back and forth with who should be my cornerback 2, who should be my cornerback 3, it's upside versus floor. I think Witherspoon gives you the floor, while Porter Jr. still has probably more upside to tap into versus Witherspoon. But also, I think something that Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio would really love about Devon Witherspoon is this dude wants to tackle. Like, few and far between to find corners that want to inflict damage like Witherspoon wants to do. And he is a hard hitter at that. So I could see him being a good culture fit and someone that, like Ron Rivera and Del Rio, if he's on the board, they're like, gotta have that guy. Manuel Forbes for the Steelers. Yeah, this is interesting. I like Forbes. The ball production's there, and there's a lot of tape that you're like, yeah, man, Forbes is a good player, but 166 pounds, I don't know. And especially over 6 foot, 2.5 foot corner and Joey Porter Jr. with 34-inch arms that ran in the mid 4.4s. To me, this has got to be Porter Jr. too. And like not even for the namesake value of it, but for the Steelers, that is something I think that they will take into account if he's on the board. So yeah, even just measuring corner to corner, I'd rather have Joey Porter Jr. here. But Pittsburgh needs a corner, so if they dress one at 17, beggars can't be choosers. I would be a happy Steelers fan. Forbes, a lot of ball production, could make for an interesting pick there at 17. Luke Van Ness to the Lions. Man, I'm still thinking he's going to go top half the first round, but if he lingers around and makes it to the Lions at 18, that's a pretty awesome value, inside-out versatility, so you can kind of move him across the line based off of, who's hot, who's healthy, all that sort of stuff, because they have other talent across that D-line I'm excited about. Of course, Aiden Hutchinson immediately comes to mind. Aleem McNeil had some good games at nose last year. Also, the breakout of James Houston on the edge. So adding Van Ness, a guy who's a flexible piece, is, I think, a big addition there to the defensive line. This could also be Kalijah Cansey. I think Van Ness is probably off the board, so Cansey would be my pick here for the Lions at 18. But nonetheless, finding that defensive lineman to pair up with a corner at 6, we've been seeing a ton of mocks for the Lions. I think that is kind of the path that I do think they ultimately take on April 28th. Then we get to the Bucs at 19. This is when Joey Porter Jr. comes off the board. I could see a variety of corners being the pick here. Bijan Robinson still available, so I still think running back is in play here for a team that's talking about reestablishing their commitment to the run. So we'll see. But, if they go corner here, that would be my preference for sure. And Porter Jr., I think they're getting a great value here. And he's the 4th corner off the board. To me, he's, like I said, back and forth between corner 2, corner 3 in this class, in my opinion. So I think it's a great value there for Tampa Bay. Next, Myles Murphy makes it all the way down to Seattle. Man, that would be awesome value. You're talking about a Seattle haul where they get Tyree Wilson and Myles Murphy. Go back 3 weeks, maybe a month. And we're talking about those guys going back-to-back at 5 and 6 to the Seattle Seahawks and the Detroit Lions, in whatever order it played out. So the fact that Seattle could get both these unbelievably freaky athletes is kind of insane. Yeah, Myles Murphy wasn't necessarily the 6'5", 275 that he was advertised to be, right? But I still think there is a freak athlete inside that body, and he still has, all things considered, a pretty good frame to work off of. It just comes down to developing him as a pass rusher. So a couple of projects there in the D-line for Seattle, but a couple of awesome, freaky athletes that help you stop the run right here, right now. So you address a need in the present while also having these guys that could develop into an awesome tandem and really address a long-term need that I have with Seattle. Because Uchenna Nwosu is on a 1-year deal. Boye Mafe, good player, but I think in an ideal world, he's kind of a DPR playing off of what you have with Myles Murphy and Tyree Wilson. So don't hate it. It's certainly a project draft here in the first round for Seattle, but it can certainly pay off big time. And the Chargers then take Jordan Addison at 21. Look, I know we ran a 4.49, but those with those back strains, so I am obviously circling the calendar for USC's Pro Day to see if Addison could run it and if he can beat that time. It literally, I think 4.49 is not horrible considering he is such a good route runner, and it's more about his ability to be quick out of breaks and him shoring up his drops last year. I think 4.49 is fine enough. But that being said, if we get to his Pro Day and he runs 4.44, I'm that much more ecstatic about Jordan Addison. So, yeah, I know he's been a kind of a loser in a lot of people's minds after the combine, but I just think that's largely injuries. And to me, he feels like a guy who's going to really crush the interview process. I think he had a good day at the podium, too, when we got to listen to him. So, feels like a high-character guy, and being able to go from one school to the next, too. Like, I don't know. I like being able to see prospects that, with a change in scenery, their level of play is still maintained. I was talking about this, actually, imagine how good this draft class would be if Jared Verse was still in it. But, Jared Verse goes from Albany to Florida State. He handles that big jump in competition, so I feel like I can bank on him being able to do the same thing going to the NFL level. So, it's not quite as drastic from Pitt to USC, but I would argue that's a step up. And Addison more than looked the part, and it was the number one, go-to guy for Lincoln Riley in his offense. And I think that speaks volumes about the kid. 22, Jackson Smith-Njigba to the Ravens. Yeah, I think this makes sense, and I could see a world where Jackson Smith-Njigba was the first wide receiver off the board, and I have been, throughout this process, not all that high on JSN. Not that I think he's terrible or he's garbage or anything like that. It's just, I think when you limit him to slot only, I would rather have Quentin Johnston, Zay Flowers, and Jordan Addison because inside-out versatility. But that being said, when you're talking about one guy in one specific role, JSN in the slot might be more productive day one than any of those other three guys playing on the outside. So it comes down to what you can make with the offense that he's put in. So this would be the job of Todd Monken, right? We just hired you an OC. We drafted a wide receiver in the first round. Make it work. So I think JSN could be a high volume guy out of the slot. Adding him into Baltimore, I'd wonder what that would mean for Mark Andrews. Would they be able to have both those guys coexist, eating over the middle of the field? If so, then man, that offense gets really scary, and you're catering kind of the strengths of Lamar Jackson's passing ability. But of course, that's also a big caveat if Lamar Jackson is back. I'm thinking he's going to play at least one more year, but every day that goes on and we're like, oh, it's going to be a tag, you're going to explore trade. I don't know. Every day that goes by, I get more and more uncertain about where Lamar Jackson's playing next year. But if they keep him around, and they take Jackson Smith-Njigba at 22. I think that's a really solid addition. And then Deonte Banks to the Vikings. Yeah, this is kind of a hot fit. Get this man press ready corner for Brian Flores in that defense. And, he was one of the few corners that didn't shrink all of a sudden at the combine, right around the same listed height and weight, 200 pounds, right around 6'2", when he checked in at the combine, and a awesome athlete, 4'3", 540. You saw it in the vert too. You saw it on the broad, explosive guy. And more often than not, he may not always win at the catch point. He's at the catch point, which I think that's a solid place to work on. We'll work on the ball skills, develop that, and I think pairing him up with Brian Flores would be a match made in heaven for what Flores wants to do, but also a landing spot where Banks could become a better football player and be the CB1 that the Vikings are looking for. And then, off of that, Andrew Booth Jr. and then Cam Dantzler, however that shakes out, if Banks were to take that step forward and be that CB1 long-term, maybe it's Booth Jr. on the outside and Dance moving in the slot, or maybe it's the other way around. But that makes me feel that much more better about that secondary in Minnesota. Then we get to the Jags. Darnell Wright, totally think this makes sense, especially with them tagging Evan Ingram, bringing him back. They did release Shaq Griffin. There's some other things they could do to free up cap space, but it does feel like Jawan Taylor is going to fetch a bag. He's coming off a really good season as a pass protector. He's in his mid-20s. That guy's going to get a payday, and the Jags might not be able to keep up. So drafting a guy who as an NFL-ready right tackle right now makes a ton of sense, coming off the best year of his collegiate career. That move from left tackle to right tackle on top of Josh Heupel and his system kind of keeping him clean. We saw him get better and better year over year at Tennessee, and especially after that flip to the right side. So really excited about his prospects, and right now he's my OT5. So taken off the board ahead of another guy that I really, really like. He was my OT3, but nevertheless, for the Jags, I think this makes a ton of sense. Looking for that right tackle. Zay Flowers for the Giants. Yep, I would be totally here for this. This guy who's inside-out versatile. That's my key here for the Giants. Jackson Smith-Njigba, yes, would be an upgrade, but what do you do then with Wan'Dale Robinson? So adding Zay Flowers gives you that over-the-top speed that they never really, I don't want to say they because Daboll only had a year with them, but that the Giants as an organization, specifically under the Daniel Jones era, have not been able to maximize Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton, these guys who can work open deep down the field. So let's get another guy in the room, and maybe it'll fix itself out now that Daboll and Mike Kafka, the head coach and OC respectively, are running the show. So Flowers, great deep speed, also a really good yak weapon. So you're kind of recouping what you lost with Kadarius Toney in that trade as well. So really like how that adds some more elements to that Giants offense. And wide receiver, they desperately need some help. And adding Flowers allows you to kind of keep around some of the pieces you already have on top of Wan'Dale Robinson. You make it work with Richie James and some of the other guys that were key contributors down the stretch. Isaiah Hodge is another name that comes to mind. So can they make that work? If so, that certainly goes a long way to improving that Giants offense. Dalton Kincaid then to the Cowboys. Yeah, don't hate it. Musgrave kind of let me down at the combine. I was expecting a faster time than a 4.61. So Kincaid may end up flipping over Musgrave. Both those guys still, we were talking about tight end 3, tight end 4. Kincaid has a lot of love and a lot of hype. I do think if there's going to be 2 tight ends in the first round, it's going to be Mayer and Kincaid versus Mayer and Washington, which those are my top 2 guys. But nonetheless, for the Cowboys to replace Dalton Schultz, that does feel like something that would make the best situation for Dak Prescott, who feels like statement inbound, but every quarterback is reliant on their situation, their ecosystem around them. But Dak Prescott, for whatever reason, feels that much more variable based off of how healthy his wide receivers are, what's the offensive line look like, where are the running backs, at, how fits the run game. So I think to keep a pristine situation around Dak Prescott, I don't think you can rule out tight end, but Bijan's available. You could also go offensive line. Cyrus Torrence still available. I think there's some other areas I'd rather see them go. Also off-ball linebacker, corner, wide receiver. I just think there's other areas I'd rather see them address versus tight end. But I understand. Then Keon White to the Bills. I mean, I've said this plenty of times. Von Miller got hurt, and the Bills went from one of the best pass rushers in football to a non-existent pass rush. That can't happen. So if they continue to take swings of that in the first round at edge, it will at least be a B-graded pick for me. And Keon White, really interesting, 6'5", 280-pound former tight end, flipped over to edge, transferred from a small school to a bigger school. And you are, like I said earlier, I love guys that can showcase, they can handle that change in scenery, handle that jump in competition. And Keon White has done just that. And I think he's still kind of figuring out the position. So a little bit of a work in progress maybe. But even comparing him to Greg Rousseau that they took in the first round, couple years back, Rousseau was raw and he was better as an interior rusher and just didn't play a whole lot of football because he opted out in the COVID year. Keon White has had a couple years of starting at the DN spot. He figured it out as a run defender, then he's picking it up as a pass rusher. So I think he is a little bit more NFL ready than a project like Rousseau was a couple years back. So good for them now, but also exciting to see what White can grow into long term. Then we get to the Bengals, Anton Harrison. Love this pick. This is the tackle I was alluding to earlier. It's my OT3. 3-year starter at Oklahoma. Really polished as a pass protector, and that's the biggest thing for me. And if the Bengals were to make this pick, this would be kind of interesting. What do you do then with Jonah Williams, right? Like, is he kicking inside to guard? Are you having him flip over to right tackle? Is it contingency for La'el Collins? Or is it a mixture of both, starting him at guard, and then if Collins is hurt or struggling, he then flips over to right tackle? I think all that is in the cards here. So I've gone tight end here for the Bengals. I've gone corner. I've gone edge. But ultimately, I think tackle would be the best thing that they could do. That or Darnell Washington, because you're then getting a sixth offensive lineman. But, you know, I'd love to see the Bengals kind of address that O-line and that blocking. Then we get to the Saints, Brian Brzee. All I'll say ahead of this weekend's mock is that McShay sniped me here. I actually think Brzee can go ahead of this just because he did showcase the athleticism that we've been talking about this whole time at 6 foot, 300 plus pounds. Looked good on Thursday at the combine. So solid that we could kind of, because we've had so much uncertainty and inconsistent kind of looks at Brian Brzee because, doesn't play a whole lot, and when he does, he's not a great pass rusher. It feels like he should be better against the run. Clemson's moving him from edge to interior defensive line there. So you never really got that one good look at what Brzee could be because of him not being on the field and being moved around, all that sort of stuff. But we did get one certainty, and that was this guy's a good athlete at his size. And I still think he can add probably a little bit more weight, add a little bit more strength, but nevertheless, seeing him be able to be a good fluid athlete bolsters his stock. He's going to be a first rounder, and it kind of takes him from this like late 1, early 2 range that I think he's kind of fallen into, just somewhere where he's going to be 18 of the Lions is kind of when I think you can start thinking about it. And then in the 20s, I think that's when we'll see Brian Brzee come off the board, at least as of right now. Then we get to the Eagles at 30. This is Kalijah Kancey. I think he goes before this, honestly. You set a combine record for 40. I don't care what position you play, you're moving up teams' boards. and then to do it at 4'6'7" at 280 pounds, man, that is crazy. Which, can we also talk about Adetomiwa Adebawore at 280 pounds, we're at 4'49". I mean, banana land. That's even faster than Kancey here, but we're not talking about Adebawore. We're talking about Kancey, and this would make for an awesome pairing with Jordan Davis, this, one of one, like Planet Theory, guy who's massive, also moves really well, but you drafted him to be a high-level run defender, so now you're drafting Kancey to be a high-level single-gap pass-rushing specialist there from the inside. Good replacement for Javon Hargrave, which I know that's exactly what McShay's thinking, because Hargrave, I think, is going to fetch a bag this offseason. Eagles are looking for a replacement. Milton Williams, we haven't gotten to see a whole lot of. I think Kancey can be a plug-and-play guy to replace Hargrave. Final pick, Derek Hall to the Chiefs. The Chiefs have released Frank Clark. I was thinking that maybe they could work out some contract, and they still might bring him back as a DPR type, but nevertheless, me talking about Clark that way was strictly as a DPR type of role. So starting position open and up for grabs, especially with Dunlap now being a free agent. So love to see them add Derek Hall, that speed rusher, opposite of Karlaftis, who wins with power in his hands. So feels like a really good tandem on one end of the D-line, and then the opposite skill set on the other side. And I think Derek Hall, I'd probably go Will McDonald instead of Derek Hall here, and some other edge rushers I might have just ahead of Derek Hall, but he is a really good football player, and adding that speed rusher, I think, is really what I'm focusing on here for Kansas City. But that is going to do it for my reaction to Todd McShay's latest 2023 NFL mock draft. Pretty solid, and now that I think about it, no Bijan Robinson in the first round. Man, it's always hard to find where those running backs are going to go. I don't know, we might see 2 running backs, honestly, go in the first round. But Man, what do I want to give McShay here? I'll grade McShay at a 93. I like the double trade for the Bears. Like a lot of the prospects, and I think they're all kind of in the right range. Bijan falling out, maybe docks him a couple points. And I think Kansas goes before 30, kind of just off the top of my head. But nevertheless, I think a pretty good mock, and I think it's fun, kind of incorporating trades, something we don't always see McShay do in the month of March. So, well done draft. I'll give him a 93. But guys, let me hear your thoughts on Todd McShay's latest mock draft down below in the comment section. What would you grade it? Whether it's a letter grade or a number grade. Love to hear your thoughts. And of course, who's your favorite team? And did you like the pick that McShay gave your squad? Love to hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. But that is going to do it for me. Like if you guys enjoyed, subscribe if you all are new. But until next time, my name is Tej, and I'm signing off.